Article 1, Section 5. Hedrick Summit Dorm, UCLA, 3 years before Election Day. On 3 occasions, Meghan Peters' life changed in a flash. The first time it happened was in a photographer's studio. There, some strange alchemy of cosmetics, lighting, and photography produced an image that caught the attention of a team of casting directors. They were in search of the perfect new actress for the role of Lenore, the sidekick of the comic book hero Raven. Meghan was beautiful, but beautiful women made up a large portion of the thousands of headshots that the casting directors scrutinized that day, each for around 10 seconds. If the filmmakers who picked her could explain to a layman like you just why that image got the nod, they would give you some vague answer about how her photograph depicted a vivid individual. If pressed for details, they might have told you that the part in her hair and the line of her jaw somehow moved the viewer's gaze to those piercing blue eyes. Something about the way those eyes gazed out of the photograph made her stand out from her throngs of competitors. Meghan got the phone call inviting her to audition for the role while sitting in her dorm room. Hanging up the phone, she squealed as she jumped excitedly around her fairly standard girls' dorm room, decorated in the common fashion for university co-eds. The bed was covered with stuffed animals, and the walls were adorned with posters. On one wall, a colorful Monet. On another was a black and white photograph of a muscular, shirtless man in jeans gazing intently at the baby he cradled in his arms. The audition process was a blur. At the end of that blur, she was picked to play the new female accomplice to the most popular hero in the Wonder Comics cinematic universe. Immediately upon being cast, Meghan was taken to a trainer. If the movie makers hoped audiences would suspend their disbelief as Meghan pummeled groups of burly men, they would have to add muscle to her physique. It was not long before Meghan's soft, feminine curves began to take on a bit of the hard edge so favored among a certain type of Hollywood director. Her physical transformation was not the only thing that delighted the film's directors. Meghan was game for anything her trainers asked her to do. Without complaint, she would resolutely return to the squat rack for another brutal set. Legs quaking with fatigue, she would report to her martial arts instructor, who would put her through a series of moves and poses that she would perform on set. Afterwards, she would grimly pack down the hard-boiled eggs and the dry, tasteless chicken breasts that her nutritionist prescribed to maximize her muscular growth. On set, she would repeat takes as many times as she was asked to, even if she was cold, tired, and frustrated. Soon, the Hollywood trade papers reported on how easy she was to work with. The online versions of those papers were read by Hollywood insiders, by movie fans who had an interest in the subject, and by a secret computer algorithm that also had an interest in the subject. Having completed her movie, Meghan returned to campus, hoping to complete her degree as her agent attempted to find future roles. Back in her dorm room, she sat by her computer before bedtime. Unaware of the potential consequences, Meghan hit the post button on her latest chirp to her fans. The chirp itself simply said, "A better tomorrow will be upon us." It attracted little attention and few likes from the human beings that read it, not even the many thousands of followers who subscribed to her feed. The chirp did attract the attention of a machine. The words that the chirp used, combined with the words in several of Meghan's previous chirps, and with news reports about her, were all measured by the machine in a very specific way. The array of numbers that the computer measurement produced fed into a series of very complicated equations. If you asked the computer what it had done, it wouldn't have been able to explain it to you. Had the computer been able to explain the calculations to a human being, it would have preferred to do so to an expert in linear algebra, preferably a PhD mathematician. Actually, the computer would have preferred if the mathematician was assisted by a computer scientist. Still, the pair would only have gotten a vague and conceptual sense of what the computer had actually done. Ultimately, what mattered was that Meghan's name came up as a search result on a special computer that resided in the bowels of Jerry Neville's mansion. Neville was pleased when the algorithm showed him who it had picked out. Over and over again, he watched the video of Meghan walking down the red carpet at the premiere of the Raven movie. Her long yellow dress accented her figure just the way Neville liked it. The white stripe that ran from the shoulder of her dress to the waist made her look almost like a contestant in a beauty pageant. Neville moistened his lips with his tongue as he slowed down the video just to see her move. It was then that a powerful algorithm that only Neville knew about kicked into gear. The algorithm was designed to change the way its target thinks and feels. Its purpose was to persuade otherwise unwilling romantic partners for Neville. The instant that happened was the second time that Meghan Peters' life changed in a flash. If you asked the machine how it planned on achieving its goal, it would answer, one step at a time. What would those steps be? The machine would send messages disguised as ordinary social media interactions and search results to its prey over the platforms that Neville owned and over the search engines with which Neville's company shared data. Then it would find the answers to two questions. First, did her behavior change in the desired direction after being contacted? Second, would her behavior have changed even without being contacted? If you asked the machine how the answers to two such simple questions gave it a chance of actually working, it would tell you that the key was by answering those questions not once, but many, many times. With so many opportunities to see what has the desired effect, the algorithm goes about its business in much the same way that a chess-playing computer defeats a grandmaster. Evaluate many moves, and then pick the one that works the best. If you told the algorithm that your skepticism remains, it would respond, I'm smarter than you because I try everything. The machine's trump card is that it has the ability to measure the results of its influence attempts with far more accuracy than any human being ever could. It was equipped to notice tiny facial movements in videos so no facial expression, no matter how brief or how subtle, escaped it. It could analyze the sound of a user's voice so no change in pitch or phrasing would be missed. Further, since users have been persuaded to buy things over computer networks for decades, the algorithm had access to an unimaginable quantity of data about what a person who is about to make the decision to buy what's for sale says, does, and feels. In fact, if you asked the machine to sum up its job description, it would tell you it's a very advanced way of doing ordinary sales. This time, instead of selling shoes or cars, it was selling the romantic attention of Jerry Neville. With the science of romantic attraction having been so well studied, the machine knew what behaviors it wanted to see. So, the computer answered that first question. Did Meghan's behavior indeed change in the desired direction after being contacted? From what the machine found from reading the contents of Meghan's written communications, from analyzing the characteristics of her voice on video and telecommunications, and from minutely examining her facial expressions in her video feeds, the answer was yes. The algorithm wasn't surprised that it succeeded. It had developed a remarkably complete picture of Meghan. It could be said that there were many ways in which the algorithm knew her better than her friends and family did. In fact, its understanding of her improved with time. Having learned from many past trials what works on her and what doesn't, each influence attempt it sends is a bit more likely to persuade than the last. Against such persistence and analysis, the human mind stands little chance. Even though hundreds of subtle messages were sent, the changes in Meghan's internet experience took effect on her feelings and actions only slowly at first. Initially, she began to feel subtle loneliness, which was gradually replaced by a growing hunger for male companionship. The actors, athletes, and bad boys that typically attracted her attention mysteriously failed to satisfy. A month later, she was surprised to feel a pulse of attraction when the pale, skinny Eric Appleton raised his hand and answered a difficult question from the professor in her chemistry class. Eric was far more surprised when a smiling Meghan approached him and attempted to start up a chat. Eric just looked at his feet. The algorithm gleefully noted the email she sent to her sister about the incident. The algorithm made sure she saw a video of a pale, skinny Jerry Neville displaying his dazzling intelligence in an interview. The algorithm watched with satisfaction as she posted the video to several of her social media feeds with her approving comments. A week later, an article telling Jerry Neville's remarkable life story went viral. Meghan noticed it. The version of the article that appeared in Meghan's feed contained a special feature that was not in the version that anybody else on the internet had seen. That feature was an email address that went to a special inbox owned by Neville. It was set up to receive the messages from the target of his algorithm. From Meghan Peters to Jerry Neville. Subject: Hi. Dear Mr. Neville, my name is Meghan Peters. I'm a student at UCLA. You might actually have heard of me because I played the part in a comic book film called Raven's Return. I played Lenore. I don't know if you're into comic book movies, but I thought I'd throw that in there. I have seen several articles about you, and I just wanted to say that I find your way of thinking fascinating. I hope that you don't think that my writing a piece of fan mail to you like this is too forward. You sound like a very busy man. I wanted to let you know that you impress me very much. Yours, Meghan Peters. From Jerry Neville to Meghan Peters. Subject: Ray, hi. Meghan, I was flattered to get your email. No, it was not too forward of you to write. No need to call me Mr. Neville. You can call me Jerry. I did see you in Raven's Return. You were great. Beautiful, too. If there are any questions you want me to answer, I'd be happy to correspond further with you. Great to hear from you, Jerry. The persuasion function was only one of the algorithm's capabilities. Called Wingman, its advisory function was just as important. It would suggest to Neville what to say, how to behave, and when to make his moves to seal the deal with a woman such as Meghan. The correspondence with Meghan continued for several weeks. Neville began to ask the question that Internet daters had been asking since the dawn of Internet dating. When should he attempt to turn his online flirtation into an actual date? With a matter as crucial to his happiness as his love life, he trusted nobody but his algorithm. The program duly crunched the numbers. About a week later, the machine assessed the probability of success as growing. Neville's time to strike had come. From Jerry Neville to Meghan Peters. Subject: coffee. Meghan, if you want to meet me for coffee, I know a great place in Silicon Valley. Don't worry about the trip. I'll send a plane. Great to hear from you, Jerry. From Meghan Peters to Jerry Neville. Subject: Ray, coffee. Dear Jerry, love to meet you. So excited. Meghan. Simply seeing Meghan Peters in the arms of a man as perpetually unlucky in love as Jerry Neville would have persuaded China's Ambassador Hong that Neville's system had successfully answered the first question: did her behavior change the way Neville wanted it to? Clearly, the answer was yes. But the Chinese and other sophisticated potential users of Neville's services would want to be sure that the answer to the second question was no. Would Meghan's behavior have changed even without being contacted? Without knowing that, it wouldn't be clear whether Neville's program worked as persuasion, or whether it simply discovered that Meghan was a sure thing. Maybe Meghan was always the type that would have fallen for Neville. Maybe the awkward technologist could have wooed her with an ordinary meeting and with his ordinary romantic advances. Had Meghan not fallen for Neville, maybe he would have found some other actress who would have fallen for him. That would leave us with our original question. If you asked the machine how it could know the answer to that crucial second question, it would tell you that, strictly speaking, a definitive answer would be impossible to obtain. Having sent its persuasion attempts, the machine could not know for certain what would have happened if it had not sent them. But the machine would tell you that it had access to so much data about Meghan's prior behavior that it could come up with an extremely accurate guess that the answer to the second question was no. Still, the machine would be asking you to trust it. And you, dear reader, like the Chinese ambassador, are too sharp to take such a sneaky and devious machine at its word. The fact remained that there was only one person in the world who would ever really know the answer to that second question: Meghan Peters herself. Discovering that answer would be the third time that her life changed in a flash. Article 1, Section 6, Dorm Room, Harwood College, 3 years before Election Day. Shanice Andrews sat back down at her dorm room desk. She picked up her phone yet again and once more dialed Jonathan Hall's number. She put the phone back down again without hitting the send button, wondering precisely what she would say. She rehearsed her planned speech one last time. Then she made the call. When a young man's voice answered on the other end, Shanice asked if she was speaking to Hall. Yes. It was at this point that Shanice forgot the pitch she had so carefully prepared and just blurted it out. I need your help. Wait, what? Who are you? Hall asked. I'm Shanice Andrews. I'm the treasurer of Campus Center for Life, which is kind of silly because the Student Senate gave our organization a budget of less than $200, so there's not much treasure for me to administer. But, Hall tried to say. That's not the worst of it, Shanice continued. We put up signs and displays around campus from time to time. They're always vandalized, but neither the administration nor the campus police ever bother to react. Okay, slow down a bit. How exactly can I help you? I don't have any money for you, and I'm not a security guard. Shanice suddenly realized she had been babbling and calmed herself. You're Jonathan Hall, the editor-in-chief of Hardy Har Harwood University's humor magazine, right? Yeah, exactly. I'm a journalist. I'm not sure what I can do for you or your club, said Hall. But you were the guy who got the administration to change their minds when they invited Mustafa Abu Kamal to speak at graduation. Yeah. The previous year, Harwood University announced news that provoked rapturous delight among the faculty, the administration, the student radicals, and the Daily Buccaneer, the official campus newspaper. Human rights advocate D. Wayne Williams would address the graduating class from his cell on death row. He had been occupying that cell since he was convicted of murdering Indianapolis police officer Richard Patterson in the mid-1990s. Williams took the name Mustafa Abu Kamal upon his religious conversion in prison. While incarcerated, Williams earned a bachelor's degree and became a writer well respected in academic circles. His articles were published in various radical journals and websites. In his first 2 years at Harwood, Hall had been a writer for the Daily Buccaneer. It wasn't long before Hall tired of being the Buccaneer's token small government guy, whose occasional columns allowed the paper to claim they provided a balanced viewpoint. With a few friends, Hall founded his own publication, the Hardy Har Harwood. When the Abu Kamal speech was announced, Hall was upset that a murderer would be honored. Hall tracked down Ellen Patterson, the widow of Abu Kamal's victim, and his 2 orphans, Ashton and Brooke, now in their 20s. He interviewed them for his magazine, detailing how the trauma of the murders had ruined their lives. He decked out the special issue of the Hardy Har Harwood dedicated to the fallen officer in black borders. The issue featured photos from the Pattersons' wedding and pictures of the doting father with his 2 young children shortly before the human rights activist brutally gunned him down. On the magazine's website, he featured video of his interviews interspersed with Patterson home movies. Here was a father frolicking with his children, and here was footage of the new widow weeping at her husband's funeral. The first print run of the special issue was stolen by campus radicals, accusing the publication of being racist. Hall simply paid for a second print run. He and his friends stocked the magazine's distribution points on campus little by little, so that radicals could only steal a few issues at a time. He found the university's master list of alumni on the server he and Kevin had hacked. He blew the remainder of the magazine's publication budget mailing copies of the Patterson issue to alumni, hoping they would pressure the university to reconsider their invitations to the cop killer. When several wealthy alumni threatened to withhold donations if Abu Kamal was allowed to speak, the university reluctantly relented. Harwood University's administration was most displeased. Most of that displeasure was directed at Hall, who was called into the dean's office. Not realizing that Hall had hacked their servers to get the alumni address list, they could find no legitimate reason to punish Hall. He was, however, warned that campus magazines should be educational rather than inflammatory, and that printing provocative material would ruin his employment prospects after graduation. I'm calling you because you're a fighter, Shanice said, standing up to pace back and forth in her dorm room. I figured you'd be the man to see. A fighter, eh? mused an intrigued Hall. So what can I do for you? Well, we can't get our message out with such a small budget, and when our materials get vandalized and our members get harassed on campus, we look like a bunch of losers. Nobody wants to join up with the losing team. Support for abortion was campus orthodoxy, so Hall, ever the contrarian, reflexively opposed it. Still, he hadn't given the issue much thought. But listening to Shanice, he saw the unfairness of the group's problems. We have a meeting scheduled tomorrow evening at 7. It's in lecture room 201 in the Adams building. Can you come by and see if there's anything we can do? Hall smiled. Yeah, let's give this one a whack. Sounds like it could be fun. Article 1, Section 7, Harvard University, 3 years before Election Day. Mei Hua expected that the culture and the quality of the education she would receive in the United States would be different from what she would have gotten in China. Chinese universities are far more technical than their American counterparts. They are far more interested in teaching a particular skill set and body of knowledge. Typical of universities in the West, Harvard was trying to teach students how to think. It was an open secret that they also insisted on attempting to teach students what to think on political and cultural matters. Although Harvard was reputed to select from the very best American students, Mei Hua was not impressed by her classmates. They had been taught how to think up until college, but without having learned the basic knowledge of their own cultural heritage, they could not apply their supposedly sharp critical thinking skills to much of anything. Mei Hua could play from memory a dozen Beethoven piano sonatas. A shocking percentage of her classmates had only a vague idea of who Beethoven was. Few of them joined her in signing up for the 19th century English literature class. Constantly checking their phones and fluttering from distraction to distraction, they simply could not handle a chapter of Dickens. The professors were hardly more impressive. The evening before class, she would often receive an email from the instructor detailing the topics to be covered in the next day's class. Often those emails would warn students that some of the topics to be covered could trigger negative emotions in the more sensitive students. Such students were excused from attending the class or even from doing the reading if they would be triggered. At the beginning of many discussion classes, the professors would frequently ask the students their pronouns. Mei Hua had learned her English so well that she could speak it without an accent. However, she often used halting, accented English as an excuse to avoid using the trendy pronouns. Smiling, slender, and pretty, Mei Hua attracted far more male attention than the dour and doughy women typical of the Ivy League. This attention did not go unnoticed among her peers and professors. Once, Mei Hua was castigated by an English professor for allowing a younger man to hold the door open for her. He alleged that by permitting such treatment she was acceding to benevolent sexism, and consequently upholding the patriarchy. In Mei Hua's culture, such acts were seen as simple kindnesses that would not be remarked upon. "You're still brainwashed from China," came the professor's curt response. The pressure from her parents to get a top-notch GPA did not let up, even at Harvard. It eventually dawned on her that speaking the plain truth as she saw it would mean lower grades. Mei Hua learned to censor herself just as strictly when discussing the topics held sacred in American academia as she did in China when discussing the policies of the Communist Party. She kept her mouth shut in class, figured out the ridiculous political perspective her professors were expecting her to parrot, and wrote essays to conform perfectly to that perspective. Not all of her classes could be passed by mouthing the right politics. Probability 2 was one such. Despite her strong background in the subject, Mei Hua realized that a top grade would not be hers without making a special effort. Midway through the first semester of her sophomore year, she reported to Professor Bao Chen's office hours to discuss some difficult combinatorics. It was hard to know what to make of Professor Chen as he sat expressionless behind a utilitarian metal desk piled high with papers and surrounded by shelves, overflowing with mathematics journals in both English and Chinese. A blackboard, crowded with calculations, covered the wall to the right of his desk. The professor's bony torso seemed lost in the starched white button-up shirt that enveloped it. What remained of his graying hair surrounded his balding head in wisps pointing every which way. When he finally spoke, Professor Chen stirred up memories of home. Mei Hua was dressed in the student's standard-issue sweatshirt and jeans, and was so used to speaking English all the time that she began posing her math question to her professor in that language. She would have had trouble describing in any language her feelings of relief and longing for home when her professor replied to her in her native Cantonese. As Mei Hua posed her questions, Professor Chen tore off a length of butcher paper from a roll stored behind his desk, and with Sharpie in hand, showed her the way to solve such problems. After guiding her through the thicket of mathematics, the professor leaned back in his creaking desk chair and smiled. "Where are you from?" he asked softly in Cantonese. "Shanghai." Within moments, it emerged in the conversation that both professor and student had come from the same neighborhood and had attended the same high school decades apart. After some time reminiscing, Chen looked seriously at Mei Hua, noticing her wistful expression. "What do you think of Harvard?" asked Chen. "I want to go home." "You didn't answer my question. What do you think of this school?" Mei Hua sensed that Professor Chen, unlike her other professors, was not looking for her to offer him prettied-up lies. Another wave of relief came over her as she let out her feelings about the institution for the first time. "It's complete madness." Chen didn't inquire as to the specifics. He just smiled knowingly. "How do you feel about the West in general?" he asked. "I'm very pessimistic," she responded, and began groping for the words to describe what she had observed. This was Harvard. This was supposed to be the place where the best American students gathered to learn to lead. And this was the best? This softness? This slavish conformity amid ostensible freedom? She couldn't decide whether she would be more disgusted if these Americans believed the nonsense they were spouting, or if they were just mouthing it out of cowardice. It wasn't even the conformity that bothered her. It was how they deluded themselves into thinking themselves free when they did it. "Watch this," Mei Hua said. She then launched into an impression of a classmate in the class that Chen had taught. He was infamous among his fellow students for his whining complaints about trivial problems. Chen stared in amazement at the performance. "How did you do that? The American accent was just perfect." "I've always been a good mimic. When I was in school in China, the girls in my class used to laugh hysterically as I did my impressions of the boys. The boys weren't too keen on those impressions, though. Anyway, I sometimes saw American leaders and celebrities on television. I tried to speak the English I was learning in class, just like they did. A few years of that, and my English was quite good." Mei Hua left Professor Chen's office feeling unburdened. It wasn't long before she returned. This time, she mostly knew the mathematics she ostensibly came to discuss. Chen suspected that she was there for more than just academic advice. It seemed she just wanted once again to speak with someone who would understand. Mei Hua did not realize it from class, but she discovered that Professor Chen had a biting sense of humor, which he aimed squarely at his American colleagues and students. It all compared so poorly to China, they agreed. As she got up to leave, Professor Chen looked serious. "There is somebody I want you to meet. I think it will be a great opportunity for you." "Thank you," replied Mei Hua. "I would like that very much." This is Ari Mendelson. I hope you're enjoying Consent. I'd love it if you could show your appreciation for my years of hard work by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. But why keep this adventure to ourselves? I wrote Kingmaker because I believe its message of keeping control of our own minds is one that America needs to hear. Young men especially will profit from learning the message that lies at the heart of these novels, that the straightest path to happiness is by improving yourself, one step at a time, rather than attempting to change others. So, share this audiobook far and wide across your favorite social platforms. See the description below for other ways for you to support my work. Thank you so much for your time and attention.